Hey guys, welcome to The Creative Entrepreneur. Today we have a great guest for you. We're going to be talking about leadership, and you don't want to miss this episode, so stay tuned.
Coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to The Creative Entrepreneur, a podcast created to help entrepreneurs build their business. Branding, marketing, analytics, positioning, and lead generation, plus interviews with other business owners to learn from their successes and failures. Now, here is your host, Abel Garza.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Creative Entrepreneur. Today we have a great guest for you. We have Adam Sinkus. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing outstanding, and I'm really glad to have you on the show today because we get to talk a little bit about leadership and how it affects a business. So why don't you start out by telling me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you do for your customers?
So I am a leadership development and culture consultant and trainer. So I work with businesses, typically medium to large size, those businesses that have a few layers of leadership. And I really work on how to disseminate that culture message through the organization. So we start with the top-down approach and really driving, what is this culture message that we want to have? And then how do we stay consistent as we move through those layers of leadership? Because what we find is as businesses scale and grow and you get more leaders, it's like the age-old game of telephone, right? So, that message changes by the time it gets down to the people that really matter. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing I talk to executive teams about is simply that culture is, it isn't what you say it is, it's how people perceive it. So that's really job one is shifting that mindset. So that they understand that it's really the people in the organization that are going to determine the culture, not this message of vision or, the mission statement that so often we apply to that methodology.
Leaders are often the ones that are dictating where the organization is going to go. And so you talk about leadership, and a lot of times leaders are the ones that are implementing change, and they're looking at which direction the organization is going to go. And so having the leadership type really is important in the organization as to how they move forward. What would you say about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's critical to understand. Leaders set that forward direction, but really when it comes down to it, the how the work is done and how people are motivated to do the work is really what sets organizations apart, right? We can all put a plan out. We can all put a really effective plan out there with dates and all the things that you would do in effective project planning and forward thinking in business. But if you don't have people that are truly engaged in the vision, the flow of where the organization is going, then it doesn't matter how good your plan is. And so that's that shift that I really focus on is we got to get the people on board. We got to get your teams that want to follow that vision and want to drive that vision for you, because that's where your success comes from, not from just making the plan.
Yeah, so there are many different types of leaders, and when you look at the styles and the way a leader approaches a certain type of change or direction that the organization is going to go, how do you identify those to to the followers? Because since you're coordinating with the leadership of the company, and obviously the people below have to buy in on either change or which direction the company is going to go. How do you chew up all that and spit it out in a way to where the organization gets that buy-in, and it helps them understand that the direction that we want to go is going to be the most prolific?
So I think there's really two pieces that really play into that. So number one is effective communication of the goal, right? And so, or of the vision of the company, right? And that goes beyond just going, here's our values and this is where we want the company to go. That's about constantly talking about it, living and eating and sleeping and breathing those values all the time. So I start with leaders in two core kind of foundations when I work with them. And that is, first and foremost, it's communication, and it's breaking it down to the basics, right? I don't know how many times I've walked into an organization and asked leaders, when was the last time you said thank you to every person on your team?
Yeah.
And, and most of the time they're like, no, I don't know. It's been a few weeks. Like, it's reshifting that mindset of communication, of starting with the core basics. Thank you. I appreciate you coming in today. I appreciate your hard work. All those kinds of things, in teaching those foundational skills as not so much something I'm forcing myself to do, but something I want to go out and do. And then the second piece of that is really about goal setting, right? Because at the end of the day, individual contributors, people low down on the ladder, could care less if the company makes 5% more in profits this year. Mm-hmm. Unless they're going to see that on their paycheck, which we both know, from a business perspective, that's not going to happen. They're not going to see that same bump. The math doesn't work out. But if I can tie their team's individual goals into the organizational goals, then I've won. So, if you want to be, a leader, a director, an executive in the organization, cool. Let's talk about how that benefits you and the organization and what steps it's going to take to get there. And now what I've done is I've taken your own personal goal and I've tied it really into what's going to help the organization hit their numbers goals, their KPI goals that they've set in place.
So you look at the leadership and you're talking about, some buy-in, and I automatically start to think about, the changes that are coming. And okay, so I've bought into it. I know what to expect. And I said, you know what, I'm down. Now, how do you measure the progress that you've made? And you do short-term goals and then try to meet those goals and then just take, chip away at the main goal?
So part of a big piece of what I focus on when I start these engagements is identifying the KPIs that are important to the organization, right? And so, that's the numbers side of it. And as a business, you have to be focused on the number side of it, because that's your measure of where your business is going. Are you succeeding in what you set out to do? But where I go from there is I then start looking at the culture drivers. I start looking at things like employee engagement. I look at productivity numbers. So are they working at 100% of their capacity? If I'm not engaged in the organization, more than likely I'm giving you about 50 to 60% effort in a day. And so, I really focus on, those individual metrics as they tie to the bigger goals. And so we establish with each organization, I establish really an individual set of what is the measure of success for this, right? And I do it in an individual basis because I find that, not every organization is looking for the same things. Not, different industries measure things different ways. So it's really just about being effective for their organization. But once we establish those measures, then it's tying back people, process, and profits to it, right? And those are the three big things. So the people side of it is how do we get them to be more engaged so that they want to come in and work and be challenged every day and solve problems and become more efficient. We look at the process. So is the process inherently the problem here, why people are disengaged in it? Are we doing 25 steps when we could do this in 10 steps? And then if we fix people and process, then profits should follow, right? And so that's really the approach that I take to it, is we start with the people and then we dive into the process and make sure that everything aligns first before we jump into trying to meet numbers and exceed those KPI numbers.
Yeah. Well, give me some steps as to how you take or how you approach this. So you go to the leaders and then you go to the decision makers and then the managers and then the employees. So if you're talking to the leaders, what is the next step? Did you bring in a meeting with the managers to follow through and see how they can approach this either change or direction for the organization, and then those managers then disseminate that information down to the other employees? And so what is your approach? I mean, what is the first step that you guys take whenever you go into an organization and start talking to leaders and try and consult them on making their leadership better or advancing their leadership objectives?
Yeah, so number one is setting up a clear definition of what are they looking for an outcome, right? Some organizations are looking for numbers outcome. Some organizations are looking more for that soft skills outcome, right? So they're looking to have just leaders that are more engaged in the people on their team. So we start there, and I always step back and go, what is your culture that you want to have, right? And I start that with the very top of the organization. Because as I move through the different levels of leadership and have interview sessions and training sessions and roundtables and things like that, I ask that same question again. What is the culture supposed to be? What do you think the culture is, right? And I start comparing those answers to see where the breakdowns occur. Really it comes down to, I don't typically work too much with line level people unless they have specific individuals that are looking to move into those leadership roles. I'm more working with the leadership teams themselves to disseminate really a clear vision through what the culture should be for the organization. And again, we always start with focusing on people. So I use my ACEs leadership model that I developed last year to really start to drive that message home with leaders. And we talk about acknowledging, or the communication piece of leadership, and how to effectively communicate with your team. Again, starting with those basics, so that when you get into the difficult conversations, the performance conversations, it's easier to have those conversations because you already have a really good rapport built with your team. Then we dive into goal setting and teaching them how to tie individual personal goals into the corporation or the organizational goals. Really focused on, what I want to do as an individual is going to be important to me. So how can I help that individual succeed in our organization and help our organization along the way? And if I can tie those together, then that individual is going to be engaged in the organization going further. Then we get into training. We talk about training opportunities and the importance of training opportunities. And that doesn't always mean like you have to sit side by side with somebody or send them into a classroom. That could be conferences, that could be online training, that could be mentoring, sitting side by side with different individuals on different teams. The training comes in a boatload of different packages. And so, but it's important that we support our goal setting with training, because if we just leave them as goals and don't provide any kind of training or resource to get there, you're never going to succeed. So the next piece is empower. And that's really about, once you've provided the training and know where the goals and where your individuals want to go, it's empowering them to take application to the new skills that they've learned, so that you can see and help guide them and really set them up for those next steps. As a leader, it's all about delegating and teaching leaders how to effectively delegate, and why it's important to delegate some of that stuff off to your team, so that you can focus on the direction of the team as well.
Yeah.
And then last piece is strengthen, which is really about celebrating success, right? So we talk so much about, learning from failure, but, we learn from failure because we deep dive into it. We ask 100 questions. Why did we fail? What could we have done differently? All those kinds of things, right? If we take that same approach with success, it totally changes the message and we get just as much out of it. So it's taking that deep dive into those success moments and going, why were we successful? Because at the end of the day, positivity breeds positivity. And so when we're talking about all the great things that we're doing as a team, the team gets excited, then they want to do more great things.
Yeah.
So, that's really the process that we go through. And depending on the organization, sometimes it's just doing training sessions with their leaders. But I always like to do some roundtable sessions and just get a baseline of where people think we're at versus where we're actually at.
Yeah, man, that's some great information. I mean, you talk about you're communicating with the leaders. You're talking to the the top of the organization, depending on how big the organization is, and if you're talking to mid-size organization, and you're talking to their leaders, and they want some sort of change. You're gonna want to talk to your managers and disseminate that information down to the employees. And of course, once you reach those certain goals, or even if you reach I guess some of the goals, you want to celebrate those and document those. And then, of course, once you've seen some success with those goals, you're eventually going to want to train and make sure that those continue. And so I'm curious to know what type of leader do you deal with on a regular basis? Do you deal with mostly, transactional, transformational type leaders, or which one do you find is most successful whenever you're dealing with this type of change?
So I find transformational leaders are the ones that are successful with this, because they're open to the broader, looking at the bigger picture just in general. And so when you start bringing in people, which is in my mind is one of the hardest things to actually measure and put a number to, they seem to grasp the concept of the importance of people in the bigger picture. When you get to the transactional leaders, I think they are the most difficult to work with, but they are the ones that are going to benefit the most from the shift in mindset. And so, I always start off with talking about how people drive numbers. And so we have to support the people in order to support the numbers. And so when you start thinking in that mindset as a leader, it starts to shift where you start looking at process improvement.
Yeah, well, the transformational, by definition, he's looking to change, he's looking to improve. So if you think about Steve Jobs, he was like a transformation, or I guess he was kind of both, I guess. In a way, he had his ways of having everything in a systemic format, and then he had his ideas that he wanted transformation. And so I think as a leader, as a successful leader, I believe that you have to incorporate a multitude of different types of leadership styles. So you have this individual who is wanting to change, wanting to evolve in this ever-changing business world, and then you have a transformational type of leader who is got ideas and wants to change, and then you have the transactional type that just continues the transformation in a way.
Yep.
I believe that the combination of both, even if it's within the same organization, is more beneficial. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree. At the end of the day, right, business is success is measured on on numbers, right? So things like revenue, things like growth year over year, those are what we measure the success of business on. And so I think it's important to recognize and understand that. And that's where the transactional leaders, I think, are so important, because they're the ones that drive that type of mentality. But at the same token, we also have to realize that the people are what actually drive those numbers. And so that's where I think transformational leaders fit into that picture, because they tend to be a little more people-centric than your transactional leaders.
Absolutely. So where do you fall in the whole scheme of things? Like, how do you facilitate this? I understand that you're going in there and you're talking to leaders, you're helping them understand how they could implement change, or maybe the direction of where they want to be. What is your position in this? Like, or did I just describe it all in one sentence? I mean, just
You almost described it, right? So I kind of wear three hats a lot of times in these. So the first and foremost is really it's that change management. So it's driving the philosophies and the thoughts behind how we become better as an organization, and really changing the focus from being so focused on numbers all the time to being focused on people and engagement in the organization. And so that's done through a lot of conversation with the higher up leaders, the people that are really setting the vision for the company. And then it goes down to, I will do a combination of roundtables or formalized classroom training sessions with leaders within the organization, depending on the size of the organization and obviously what needs to get done on a day-to-day basis, is how we figure that out. But the training is typically, it's about 16 hours worth of training, and we break down the ACEs model in a lot of detail, and we talk about how ACEs can support the numbers in itself. And really grow the KPIs of the company.
So ACES is your model?
ACES is my model. Yep.
What does it stand for?
Acknowledge, cultivate, empower, and strengthen. So it's the four pillars of how we work through supporting people in business. It's either the training, or we do roundtable sessions, spending a lot of time one-on-one, side-by-side with leaders in their day-to-day, asking the questions that kind of go along with, how are you communicating with your team? What are your team's goals? And really getting them to think about the other side of the organization, the people side of the organization. And so, so again, I tailor it to the organization, but those are it's either typically done in small groups or one-on-one sessions with smaller organizations, or I try and do like a classroom session with 8 to 10 leaders. Yeah. And it's about 16 hours worth of training to jump through that.
And the training is for the leaders, or is it for everybody?
It is for the leaders or those that are on your leadership track in your organization. So if you have people that are, so do they come to you with a specific challenge? Because I know there's all different types of challenges, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I'd like to know, do they come to you with a specific challenge or issue, and they say, come on and help me fix this, based on your knowledge of leadership, or do you just go and talk about leadership in general? So we talk a lot about process and engagement in general. So because those are two big factors in culture and in the culture of the organization. When processes and engagement break down, typically there's a lot of bigger pieces at play there. So so it's really, I work with organizations that are having trouble a lot of times with engagement, employee engagement. Getting retention is another area that I talk to organizations about. So it's, those are, I would say retention is a big one. I would say employee engagement. So they've just done their annual employee engagement survey or culture survey, and the results came back poorer than last year. Or they clearly see that they have a disconnect in their leadership.
Have you seen success with that?
I have seen success with that. Yeah. The big thing, when you shift to a people first organization, you have to understand that it's in it for the long haul. And so a lot of companies, when I first start talking to them, they're looking for that quick, like, if we do a 4-week project with you, what kind of results should we expect in 4 weeks? Well, your culture didn't get here overnight, and it's not going to shift to where you want to go overnight. But, we definitely can show you how to measure to that success, and we can show you why your employees and how your employees will be happier when we start applying these methodologies and these approaches to it. So I typically look for 3 to 6 month performance indicators. And one of the big ones is I will have them rerun their employee engagement survey. And we look for positive change there. And if we see positive change there, typically you will see productivity numbers go up. You will see profits and revenues increase for the year as well. So,
well, real quick, I just wanted to ask you also, what specifically do you find that is the most challenging once they're trying to implement these changes?
So for me, the biggest monster is the shift in mindset, right? So we have so many senior leaders that have been in leadership roles for long time, 15, 20 years, sometimes even more than that. And so they have very much that numbers boss mentality, right?
Yeah.
The do what I say because we need to get the numbers to this point. And so I would say that is probably overall one of the biggest challenges to overcome is getting that shift in mindset of those folks that have been in leadership roles for extended periods of time.
That makes total sense.
And it's not that they don't have the interpersonal skills to talk to people, because I wholly believe that they wouldn't have got to where they're at without those skills.
I was just thinking that.
It's just simply that they don't lead with those skills. They lead with, we need the business to be successful, and this is what success looks like.
Yeah, it's getting that over that mentality of it's your baby, and you don't want to, not saying that it's ugly or whatever, but just kind of saying that maybe I need some help, or maybe some change, or the direction of the organization's not going where I'm wanting it to go. How can I get some help in trying to implement this? Usually I like to end the podcast with some words of wisdom or some rules that you live by. About 3 of them. Would you say that you have some of those right now?
So rules that I live by. So one is, I am all about giving, right? So at the end of the day, the more you give out to people, when you are in a time of need or when those opportunities arise, it comes full circle. And so I wholeheartely say, give 1,000% out. Everything you can give out to the world, give out to the world. Because you're going to make the world a better place, and you're going to drive people to be better people. And, I do this on LinkedIn all the time, in just sharing out these nuggets of wisdom. And really what that's done is it's helped build me an organic business. I do spend time on sales, but, I also get a lot of leads coming to me going, hey, I saw this post about, and that's something that our organization is challenged with. And so when you give out, people see that, and people see that you're just genuinely trying to inform people or help people. And so that's my biggest words of wisdom is
Awesome.
continually be focused on giving as a leader, as an individual, everything you do.
Yeah. Well, you continually try to give, build your relationships with other people, and eventually it comes back forward. Well, there you go, guys. Adam Sinkus, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Remember that he has a YouTube channel. He's going to start his consulting business, and he's coming out with a new book. You want to stay tuned for that. It's going to be all in the show notes. So again, thank you, Adam, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You're an inspiration to me and to our listeners, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great afternoon.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you haven't done so, please subscribe and check out our website at thecreativeentrepreneur.net. And until next week, keep on keeping on.
Thank you for listening to The Creative Entrepreneur. Please click the show notes for additional information. Want to know more? Click on the subscribe button and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter by visiting us at tcepodcast.net.